Romans 15, verse 25. But now I go unto Jerusalem to minister unto the saints. So when Paul's writing get Galatians 2:10, when Paul's writing to the Romans here, he's doing so in Acts 20, verse 3, and he's telling them that he's about to head up to Jerusalem, and he's going to do so to minister unto the saints. So why is he ministering unto the saints? Galatians 2:10, and we'll start in verse 9. Galatians 2:9. And when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go into the heathen, and they into the circumcision. Galatians 2:9 is a description of the agreement that is reached in Acts 15 between the 12 and Paul as to their various ministries. Now notice verse 10. Only they would that we should remember the poor, the same which I also was forward to do. Now in verse 10, this is a verse that gets quoted a lot today, and the idea is remember the poor and give to those that don't have much. And, there's nothing wrong with that in general. But understand that what's going on in Galatians 2:10 is a very specific context. And the specific context is the poor saints that were at Jerusalem. And those saints were poor for a very specific reason. And we're going to look at that. So Romans 15, verse 26. Romans 15:26. For it hath pleased them of Macedonia and Achaia to make a certain contribution for the poor saints which are at Jerusalem. Get 2 Corinthians 8. So the particular poor saints they're concerned about here are in a specific location. It's the poor saints at Jerusalem. 2 Corinthians 8, verse 1. Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit. In other words, we want you to know. We do you to wit of the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, how that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power, they were willing of themselves, praying us with much entreaty, that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And so what Macedonia did is they gave funds to Paul that he was to use to minister to the poor saints. It tells you that those poor saints weren't in their region, or they would have just done it themselves. The poor saints were located elsewhere. The poor saints are, in fact, in Jerusalem. Verse 6, insomuch that we desired Titus as he had begun, so he would also finish in you the same grace also. Therefore, as ye abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge and in all diligence and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also. So what's happening here, as Paul writes 2 Corinthians to the Corinthians, he is anticipating going and visiting them, but he's obviously not there yet. He writes in 2 Corinthians before his visit, he says, I want you to know, I do you to wit, I want you to know of the grace of God bestowed upon the churches of Macedonia. The churches of Macedonia have given this great gift to the poor saints at Jerusalem. I wanted you to be aware of it, and I'm sending Titus to make you aware of these things. Look with me at verse 14. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 14. But by an equality, that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, that their abundance also may be a supply for your want, that there may be equality. And we're going to talk in just a minute about exactly what's going on there, but let me first make this observation. In 2 Corinthians 8, Paul writes to the Corinthians before he's going to arrive in Corinth. And he sends Titus, and what he's saying essentially is, guys, I'm going to be there soon. Be prepared if you want to make a gift to the poor saints at Jerusalem. So 2 Corinthians is that instruction. Well, do we know from Scripture how the Corinthians responded to that? Do we know what their decision was, how they reacted? Look with me at Romans 15:26. Romans 15, verse 26. For it hath pleased them of Macedonia. Well, we already knew about that from 2 Corinthians 8. And Achaia. Corinth is in Achaia. To make a certain contribution for the poor saints which are at Jerusalem. So the question that is unknown in 2 Corinthians, Paul writes to the Corinthians and says, get ready, guys, because I'm going to be there, and this is your opportunity to give to the poor saints at Jerusalem. Do we know how that turned out? Yeah, we know how that turned out from Romans 15:26, because it wasn't just Macedonia, it was also Achaia that made a gift for the poor saints at Jerusalem.